Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome our members and guests to this, the second dinner meeting of the 1987-88 club year. We especially welcome the many family members who are guests this evening. It's a special pleasure to have you with us at this traditional December meeting. We are also pleased to recognize tonight the student groups from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management of Northwestern University and congratulate them on the fine work that they did in preparing business plans for the class project in their venture capital and entrepreneurship courses. Attendance at this dinner this evening is awarded to 3 winning teams. The course is taught by the partners of Frontenac Venture Company. That's a plug for Mike Koldyke, I guess. The next meeting of the club will be our forum luncheon on Wednesday, January 13th, here in the Grand Ballroom. The discussion topic will be the importance of sports stadiums for the Chicago economy. How about that? The chairman and moderator for this panel will be Barry F. Sullivan, chairman of the board, the First National Bank of Chicago. The panelist will be John Madigan, chairman of Chicago National League Ball Club, vice president of the Tribune Company, Michael McCaskey, president and chief executive officer of the Chicago Bears, Thomas A. Reynolds, Jr., chairman of Illinois Sports Facilities Authority and managing partner of Winston Strawn, and William W. Wirtz, president and director of the Chicago Blackhawk hockey team. So please mark your calendars for January 13th. Announcements are in the mail today. Our next dinner meeting will be Thursday, February the 25th, 1988. Our speaker will be Robert S. Strauss, Esquire, partner of Aiken, Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Feld, and former cabinet member and President Carter's personal representative for Mideast negotiations from 1979 to 1981. The dinner will be here in the Grand Ballroom, and announcements will be mailed in mid-January. The final forum luncheon for the season is set for Tuesday, March 8th, 1988. The topic will be the presidential nominating process. Chairman and moderator will be Newton N. Minow, partner of Sidley and Austin. Please put that date on your schedule. Now it is my pleasure to introduce those at the speakers' table. As I call their names, I will ask each to stand and remain standing until all have been introduced, and in the interest of time, I hope you will withhold your applause until all have been introduced. Beginning at my far left, J. Stanley Pepper, member of the Reception Committee, president of Pepper Construction Company. R. Harper Brown, vice chairman, the Meyer Cord Company. William C. Weinsheimer, partner of Hopkins and Sutter. Edward R. Schwinn, Jr., president and chief operating officer of the Schwinn Bicycle Company. The Reverend John T. Richardson, president of DePaul University. Richard L. Duchessois, chairman and chief executive officer of Duchessois Industries, Incorporated. Homer J. Livingston, Jr., president and chief executive officer, LaSalle National Corporation. Bernard F. Brennan, president and chief operating officer of Montgomery Ward and Company. Dempsey J. Travis, president and chief executive officer of the Travis Realty and Insurance Company. Lee W. Jennings, a director of the club, president of Jennings & Associates. Donald P. Kelly, chairman and chief executive officer of E2 Holdings, Incorporated. Peter S. Wilmot, a director of the club, chairman, president, and chief operating officer of Carson Perry Scott and Company. James Otis, Jr., a director of the club, chairman and chief executive officer of Otis Associates, Incorporated. Epilateral, better known as Ann Landers, syndicated columnist, the Chicago Tribune. Gary E. McDougall is a director of the club, chairman of the board of Mark Controls Corporation. Robert K. Wilmoth, a director of the club, president of National Futures Association. Hannah Holborn Gray, president of the University of Chicago. Weston R. Christopherson, a director of the club, chairman and chief executive officer of the Northern Trust Company. Charles T. Brumback, a member of the executive committee and a director of the club, president and chief executive officer of the Chicago Tribune Company. And now, beginning at my far right, Michael P. Galvin, member of the reception committee, a partner of Winston Strawn. F. Quinn Steppen, chairman, president, and chief executive officer of Steppen Company. Anthony M. Mandolini, partner of Pete Marek, Main and Company. Lawrence O. Booth, President of Booth Hanson Associates Incorporated, Carol B. Whitcomb, Executive Director of Associated Colleges of Illinois, John B. Schwem, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of R.R. Donnelly and Company, the Reverend Raymond C. Baumhart, President of Loyola University of Chicago, Cyrus F. Friedman, Jr., Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Booz Allen Hamilton Incorporated, Howard C. Morgan, Senior Vice President of Citicorp, Lee A. Ellis, a Director of the Club, Senior Vice President, Northwestern University, Jerry D. Fluno, a Director of the Club, Vice Chairman, W. W. Granger Incorporated, Alan E. Bully, Jr., a Director of the Club, President of Bully & Andrews, Carl D. Bays, a Director of the Club, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of IC Industries Incorporated, Patrick G. Ryan, a Director of the Club, President and Chief Executive Officer of Aon Corporation, Andrew J. McKenna, President and Chief Executive Officer of Schwartz Paper Company, William D. Smithberg, a Director of the Club, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Quaker Oats Company, Gene Allard, a Director of the Club and a Program Chairman, partner Sonnenschein, Carlin, Nath, and Rosenthal. Now it's time for a round of applause. Now tonight, in spite of a record crowd, we are going to have one very short intermission. It will last only 5 to 10 minutes. We are crowded, so if possible, I'll ask that you not wander around so much. It's sort of like a seventh inning stretch. So 5 or 10 minutes from now, the gavel will come down and we'll expect you to be seated. Thank you.
Right on time.
We're on time. Let's be seated, please. Please be seated. How are they doing, Charlie? Are they sitting now?
Yeah, I'd say another 30 seconds.
Okay, well, we're probably all right. I want him on about 8:15. What do you want? Yeah, he'll make it. He made it. He didn't get lost. I was a little worried about him getting lost, but he didn't.
Looks pretty good.
Be seated, please. How are they doing, Charlie? Think I can start?
I would. I think we got a few stands back there.
Please be seated. It's time for the introduction. Thank you. Thank you. Our speaker this evening is the first athletic coach ever invited to address the Economic Club of Chicago. Now, you might wonder why an athletic coach would be asked to participate in a forum whose stated purpose is to focus on the important economic and social issues of the day. I suppose the answer could be that football has assumed the proportions of big business in America in our time. Or perhaps our speaker is especially appropriate because tonight is the Economic Club meeting at which we invite all of our college-age sons and daughters to be with us. Or, quite possibly, we wanted to recognize tonight one of this country's great institutions of higher learning and at the same time draw attention to the fact that this year is the 100th anniversary of football at the University of Notre Dame. After all, Notre Dame and football are one and the same. Then perhaps our speaker comes to us because he has been responsible for the long-awaited turnaround in the fortunes of America's favorite football team. May I remind you that he is the only man in America who has this year coached Tim Brown the 1987 Heisman Trophy Award winner. Our guest speaker is for sure the hottest football mentor in the game today. And then maybe the gentleman who will address us tonight is here simply because he is a preeminent speaker. He is one who so effectively spreads his motivating message to audiences all across this country. The fact is that all of the above reasons are true. In inviting Lou Holtz to address this discriminating audience this evening, we could not have made a better choice. Lou Holtz is one of the most respected coaches in this country. But above all else, Coach Holtz is a motivator, a man who likes to make things happen. As one Holtz maxim goes, if what you did yesterday seems big, you haven't done anything today. Now, many knowledgeable people say that Lou Holtz's position as head football coach at the University of Notre Dame is one of the most pressure-packed jobs in sports. The focal point of all that pressure responds by saying, God doesn't send anything your way you can't handle. But sometimes I think he overestimates my talents. Perhaps God simply goes with the percentages. In his 18 years as a collegiate head coach at William & Mary, North Carolina State, Arkansas, Minnesota, and Notre Dame, Lou has won 129 games, lost 74, and tied 5 times. And in each position, he has started out in the hole and turned losers into winners. In 1985, when Lou Holtz took over, Notre Dame had just suffered its 8th losing season in 98 years. It would be nice to report that Holtz turned it around in 1986, but he didn't. His team added the 9th losing season, going 5-6 against a ferocious schedule. Coach Holtz offered no apologies. He presented this explanation instead. Quote, many people who identify with Notre Dame believe in miracles. The fans expect a miracle every Saturday and a major one now and then. I believe in miracles, but I don't believe they can be created by coaches. Some things cannot be changed overnight or even in a year, end of quote. When Lou Holtz was hired, Ara Precision, one of the Notre Dame legends whose act he has to follow, predicted that Coach Holtz would turn the program around in 3 years and have Notre Dame back in the top 20 and in a major bowl game. It did not take that long. 1987 was a winning season for his team, which won 8 while losing 3. Notre Dame this year earned a national ranking well up in the top 20, and Lou Holtz's team will be playing in the Cotton Bowl on January the 1st instead of watching it on TV. Now, Coach Holtz will soon observe his 51st anniversary of his birth, which occurred on January 6, 1937 in Follinsby, West Virginia. He grew up in nearby East Liverpool, Ohio, earned a Bachelor of Science degree in history from Kent State in 1959, and a master's degree in arts and education from Iowa in 1961. And incidentally, the Holtzes are truly a Notre Dame family. One son is a Notre Dame graduate, another is a junior there this year, and their youngest daughter is a freshman. Motivating others is what coaching is all about, and Lou Holtz decided early in his career to be his own self-motivator. He recalls, I sat down and made up a list of things I wanted to accomplish in life. There were 107 of them. Some of them involved traveling, and some were a little crazy, he says. Some of them have happened, like appearing on The Tonight Show and being invited for dinner at the White House. He says, I think I've accomplished 81 of them after shooting a hole-in-one last spring. Becoming head coach at Notre Dame was also on the list, as witnessed by the escape clause he had written into his last coaching contract just in case the opportunity ever presented itself. But Lou Holtz insists, I didn't come to Notre Dame to be a legend. I came to be a football coach, preferably a winning coach. So it is with great pleasure that I give you a man who is in real danger of becoming a legend in spite of himself, Coach Lou Holtz of the University of Notre Dame.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bryan. Reverend clergy, distinguished guests of the head table, members of the Notre Dame family, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I've been flattered and honored for that introduction. I must say, Mr. Bryan, that's a type of introduction I could listen to all night. Just like you, ladies and gentlemen, I thought I was going to have to. I think that was... 7 minutes in duration. I really am flattered and honored to be here tonight, and I must say that I have a great deal of intrepidation as I approach this group because I know what a very successful and distinguished group we have here. When I first accepted this invitation, I did not realize that the award would be given to Tim Brown tonight at the Heisman dinner. I accepted this invitation approximately 6 months ago, and then when I found out that the dinner was going to be on the same night, I approached different people and I said, I think it would be nice if I was at the Heisman Award with Timmy Brown. But it was too late to retract the invitation, and the only proper thing was for me to be here, and I want you to know that I am very happy, proud, and honored to be here. Notre Dame honors a commitment. I hope they realize that with my contract as well in the future. But I am happy to be here. You know, I did go with Timmy Brown last Saturday when they announced the winner of the Heisman. I went to New York not to be with Timmy Brown when he won the Heisman. I went to be with Timmy Brown in the event he did not win the Heisman. Once they announced that the 53rd winner of the Heisman Award is Timmy Brown, I need not be there any longer. The president was calling the news media and certainly his family and the well-wishers. And we're exceptionally proud of him because here's a young man that set a goal, set some dreams, set some objectives, and he achieved it. I wished I could say I was a great athlete, but as I was being interviewed by Jim Nance on CBS TV, we stood right there with the Heisman Award in between us. And Jim Nance said to me, he said, did you ever think you would win the Heisman when you were playing? And I said, no, but I wanted to. I really wanted to win the Heisman when I was participating in college because I would have been the first individual to ever graduate from Kent State University and win the Heisman. In addition to that, I would have been the first third-teamer to ever win it. But it just wasn't meant to be. The thing I'm going to talk to you about tonight, and I'm not going to preach to you or lecture to you. As I said, I'm flattered and honored to be here with such a distinguished group. Is just to basically talk about how we try to handle success and how we try to handle adversity. As I was going through the different things that have happened in my life, it all of a sudden occurred to me, I seem to have been faced with much more adversity than I have been success. But I couldn't help but reflect back when I was at the University of Arkansas and we beat Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. They put me in the Hall of Fame, made a commemorative stamp honoring Lou Holtz, and put my picture on the stamp. That was all very impressive to me, but a year later when we lost to the University of Texas, they had to do away with the stamp because the people kept spitting on the wrong side of it, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been on top and I've been on the bottom, and I'm sure I'm going to be at both places again. That introduction was really wonderful, Mr. Bryan, but it was also obvious to me that that introduction was written long before we played the University of Miami or went for two and lost at the University of Penn State. But nevertheless, I am flattered and honored, and I'm not going to try to impress you. I just want to share some thoughts and ideas as best I possibly can. Whenever you talk about success, whenever you talk about adversity, and I know I'm talking to a very successful group, the one thing I know is you cannot have success without having adversity. And the people in this world that are really successful are those that overcome adversity. And you can't help but think about success and adversity without thinking about our spouses. You know, it's amazing how they stay with us so long, and yet sometimes we have a tendency to take them for granted. And even though my wife isn't with me tonight, I want to say this: there's nobody in this world that we ought to get advice from any quicker than our spouse. Because nobody loves us anymore, nobody cares about us anymore, and nobody will give us a more honest answer than our spouse. And I just want to go on record and tell you how fortunate I feel to have my wife. I think we all ought to feel that way, because it's really a team when you're going to have success, because you're going to have adversity as well. It's like the guy was driving down the road and the patrolman pulled him over and said, "Sir, you were doing 72 and I'm going to give you a ticket." The guy said, "Ain't no way." He said, "I want you to know I had that thing on Cruise-O-Matic and I had that speedometer checked last week. I was doing 55. And the guy said, "Well, I'm sorry, but I had you clocked at 72 and I'm going to give you a ticket." The guy became irate and said, "You give me a ticket, I'm going to punch you right in the nose. Now have your job." The patrolman looked at his wife and said, "Is he like this all the time?" She said, "Only when he's drunk." So I would appreciate if you'd do me a favor when you go home tonight is tell your spouse how much you appreciate him. To me, I had several experiences. I couldn't help but reflect back in the year 1976. I was called upon to go become the head football coach of the New York Jets. I turned the job down 3 different times. On the 4th time, I finally accepted it. I said to my wife and family, I'm not sure this is what I want to do, but let's go see what it's like. If we don't like professional athletics, we can always come back to intercollegiate athletics. And I went up to New York without a commitment. I went up to accept the head coaching job of the New York Jets, which what should have been the epitome of success, which should have been the happiest time of my life. And I want to tell you there, I went there without a commitment. I went there without a sense of purpose. And I was a completely miserable failure. After 8 months, I woke up every day saying, I'm not sure this is what I want to do. I'm not sure this is going to work out. And one day I get up and resign. And nobody in this world will ever understand the embarrassment and the ridicule that I experienced for years later. Even today, an newspaper man cannot seem to interview me without wanting to talk to me about the Jet experience, and it's something I failed at, and it was nobody's fault but mine. Leon Hess, the owner, is one of the most beautiful people in this world you could ever want to be around. I had everything right there in New York City, the Big Apple, the whole bit, and I failed to take advantage of it or even enjoy it. And then in 1984, they called me up to the University of Minnesota to coach up there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd never been to Minnesota before, and the one thing I knew I didn't want to do was go live in Minnesota. I'd never been there, but all I knew about that state was every day in the USA Today they were in dark blue. The only people I'd ever met from the state of Minnesota had blonde hair and blue ears, and I didn't want to go up there. Now, they had offered a job to 5 different people, and all 5 of them turned the job down. A guy by the name of Harvey McKay, who's one of the greatest salesmen in the world, said to me, he said, this is a great opportunity. And I said, Harvey, you had 5 people turn the job down, including 3 assistant coaches. He said, this is a great opportunity. He said, for example, Nebraska only beat us last year by 10. Well, that impressed me because I know the type of program Nebraska has. But I didn't realize he meant 10 touchdowns. Nebraska beat Minnesota 84-13, Ohio State 76-18, and the list went on. We had lost 17 straight games. The average score was 47-13. In 1 year, we had given up 518 points, which was slightly more than our basketball team gave up. Now, that's true fact. Now, the program went down not because of a coach. The program went down because people stopped believing you could win. People started saying, well, what difference does it make whether I work, whether I help, whether I contribute or not? The whole attitude became, we can't win. 18 months later, that same football team was in a bowl game. And not because of me. And not because of any individual. The only thing we did was change the attitude in the state that we had a lot to be proud of and we could win. I'll never forget the first interview being on TV there in the state and said, I want to tell you right now we can win here, but we need your help. And the in-state athlete had to stay at Minnesota. I said, if we're going to be successful, the heart and soul of our team must come from Minnesota. I said, now you do understand the arms and legs got to come from elsewhere because we didn't have a lot of speed in that state, but Now here's the point I project to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's attitude. Should have been so happy at New York, and I was absolutely miserable. And should have been very miserable in Minnesota, and yet it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. I learned to love the state of Minnesota. I learned to love the people up there and still have great respect for them. And I enjoyed being there, even though the state bird is a mosquito. It's just a great place, but it's all the attitude of how we approach things. And to me, I think that is the most important thing that we try to get across to our athletes or any place I've been, and I try to get across to myself, is the attitude. See, God gave us an awful lot of wonderful powers. He gave us the power to think, to laugh, to create, to imagine, to plan. But the greatest power God has given us is the power to choose. We can choose to act or procrastinate, believe or doubt, pray or curse, help or heal, succeed or fail. And I firmly believe that in the bottom of my heart, it's really our decision. It's our decision of how we basically approach things. Now, I'm a great believer in hard work. Because hard work builds confidence, and confidence allows you to handle adversity. But there's no way in this world you can possibly win without hard work. I'll never forget when you talk about the great athlete. Let's talk about Tim Brown for a minute. Everybody said, boy, Tim Brown's a great athlete. He is. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, 2 years ago, he had never caught a punt in his life. Here's an individual who wasn't even all-state in high school. Never played on a football team and had a winning season in his entire life. And everybody watches him against Michigan State catch punts and run two of them back. But the thing about Tim Brown was Tim Brown spent hours catching punts. Every time you find somebody successful such as yourself, people say, boy, wasn't he lucky. But you and I both know that there's no way in this world you're ever going to get anything without hard work, and that's what I respect about Notre Dame. I could tell you an awful lot of things about Notre Dame, how proud and honored and happy I am to be there. I did not come there to contribute to Notre Dame. I came there to be part of the Notre Dame family because I believe and am proud of the fact that in the last 21 years at the University of Notre Dame, we've had 514 senior football players, and 508 of them have graduated, and most of them on time. It does bother me at times when you have 8 or 9 athletes miss practice because of a tutoring session, but when you understand that that's the whole value of Notre Dame, when you understand that you're going to have to work at Notre Dame in the classroom and on the football field, that we're teaching them something about life. In the day of instant coffee and instant tea and instant success, there's no such thing. It's hard work, it's determination. If you work hard, you're going to have a chance. But without it, you have no chance. You can't have confidence. And you aren't going to appreciate anything that was given to you easy. And when we have adversity in our life, I always look at it and say, that's why I'm paid. You're paid because of problems. If everything would go easy, they certainly wouldn't need you. We earn our salary when we lose at Penn State, when we lose at Miami. Anybody can coach football, ladies and gentlemen, when you're 10-0. Anybody can coach when you're winning, when everything goes along smoothly. Anybody can run a company. Anybody can run a corporation when everything's going great. But what sets you apart is your willingness to work when you have adversity. Because if you're willing to work, your confidence builds. I could tell you stories about confidence, but the best one I remember was 1948. I'm a baseball fan. And boy, one day Cleveland was in first place, the next day Boston was. The last day in 1948, we were playing the Detroit Tigers. Our manager was Lou Boudreau, a player manager who was out of the lineup with an injury. The bottom of the ninth, Cleveland's behind by 1 run, 2 runners on, second and third, Bob Kennedy at the plate. He got strike 1, he got strike 2. No sooner did he get strike 2, and the announcer said, your attention, please. Pinch hitting for Bob Kennedy is Lou Boudreau. Here's a manager going up with 2 strikes on him, putting himself at a critical time. Whether he failed or whether he succeeded wasn't really important years later. But to me, I've often thought about that, what confidence a gentleman had to have in his talents and his abilities to go up there and put himself in that position. The story does have a happy ending because he did make a hit, and Cleveland scored 2 runs and won. And the next day, Gene Bearden beat the Boston Red Sox in a 1-game playoff. And even though the Indians lost the World Series, I thought how wonderful that is. Or how about Ted Williams? Ted Williams on the last day of batting, last day of the season, is hitting 3.99998. If you round it off, he's a 400 hitter, but on the last day, a doubleheader, rather than sit out and be a 400 hitter, he said, if I'm a 400 hitter, I'll do it the proper way. He played a doubleheader, he went 5 for 7, ended up hitting 406. Confidence comes because you're willing to work, and if you have confidence, then you can handle adversity. Coaching is a very trying profession. I wished I could say that things go easy sometimes, but it ain't different in your job. Many times I feel like the guy down in Texas that owned the big, beautiful ranch. So he invited a group of dissidents out to show them how their better half live. But he didn't want any of them swimming in the swimming pool, so he filled it up with alligators. And he announced to me, he said, if any of you have the courage to dive in the pool, swim through the alligators, I'll give you any 3 wishes. My daughter's hand in marriage, a deed to this ranch, or $1 million in cash, because he didn't think anybody'd have the courage to do it. But he no sooner turned his back and he heard this splash, and for 22 minutes the guy fought the alligators, emerged victoriously, and the owner of the ranch said, boy, that was a great display of courage. He said, I didn't think anybody'd have the courage to do it, but to show you that I'm a man of my word, I'll give you any 3 wishes. My daughter's hand in marriage, I did this ranch, or $1 million in cash. What's your wish? Guy said, I want to know who pushed me in that pool. Wait. We all get in that situation sometimes and wonder, hey, how'd I get here? But to me, adversity happens, and if you have confidence in yourself, you're going to be able to handle adversity. You know, there's a guy by the name of Bill Robertson, a 1973 graduate of my alma mater, Kent State University. Came within 800 yards of swimming the English Channel, and you say, what's so great about that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Bill Robertson's a paraplegic. He doesn't have the use of any legs. Or how about Shelly Mann? At the age of 1, they put Shelly Mann in the water in a life preserver because she's completely paralyzed. They put her in a life preserver, put her in the water, hoping that the buoyancy of the water would give her some exercise. Little did anybody realize that 16 years later in Melbourne, Australia, Shelly Mann had won 2 gold medals and be declared the fastest woman swimmer in this world. And as we sit here tonight in this beautiful Palmer House, we look around and see in this great country and the opportunities that we have, I got to feel I've got to be one of the luckiest people in this world. Sure, we have problems. Sure, we have things that we have to handle. You and I both have problems, but boy, aren't we fortunate to have the talents and the ability and be in the position where we are? I get down on my knees and thank God so many times that I have the opportunities that I have. And I'm sure you feel exactly the same way. See, I don't believe you can ever achieve many things in this world if you don't aspire for greatness. If you take a good look at me, you'll notice the following characteristics about Lou Holtz. I stand 5 feet 10, weigh 152 pounds, wear glasses, speak with a lisp, and have a physique that appears like I've been inflicted with beriberi and scurvy most of my life. I'm not going to impress anybody physically or mentally, but I had a very traumatic thing happen to me in the year 1966. We went to the University of South Carolina under a gentleman by the name of Marvin Bass. My wife was 8 months pregnant with our son, Kevin. We had spent every cent we had in the bank for a down payment on the home, and 1 month after I took the job, Marvin Bass resigned. They hired at that time what was one of the great college football coaches in the country, Paul Dietzel. Paul Dietzel came in, sat down, visited with me a few minutes, and said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to have a place for you on my staff. I'm going to bring my entire staff from West Point. I could not fault him, but at that time, when you're unemployed, out of a job, you become very insecure. And my wife, I'll always be devoted to her, she didn't complain. She tried to support me, and I had some time on my hand. She bought me a book, The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And ladies and gentlemen, the only thing that ever changes from where we are today to where we're going to be 5 years from now are the books we read and the people we meet. And I read that book, and he said, if you're bored with life, if you feel with despair, if you feel inferior, he said, your whole problem is you don't have any goals. And boy, I started listing down all the things I wanted to do. And he said, put down anything you want, anything came to your mind. Man, I wanted to win the national championship, go to the White House for dinner, be on the Tonight Show. I wanted to land on an aircraft carrier, make a hole in one, be a member of Augusta. It went on and on. Pretty soon, you know, I got 107 of them. I go to my wife, I said, look at that, honey. 107 of those suckers, and we're going to do every one of them. She said, gee, that's nice. She said, why don't you get a job? Well, at that time, I felt that was pretty good advice, so we made 108. But I want to tell you, it changed my life. If you show me somebody that is bored with life, you show me somebody that doesn't get up in the morning and have a burning desire to go do something, I'll show you somebody that doesn't have any dreams or hopes or ambitions. It was mentioned I made a hole in one this past year. Now, I believed that I would make a hole in one, and if you ever saw me play golf, you'd say, that's ridiculous. You couldn't make one. I'm not a good golfer, but all of a sudden my attitude changed to, hey, good things are going to happen. Good things are going to happen because you expect them to happen. I've had people say, I'll never win that lottery, and they don't. But if you believe things are going to happen. I made a hole in one, but as I said, I'm not a good golfer. I played in the Danny's Thomas Open about 6 years ago with Lee Trevino, Gerald Ford, and Bob Hope. There were about 40,000 people following us, a true story. And boy, I get up there on that first tee, and man, there are just wall-to-wall people down there. I hit one off in the rough, and I go over there, and they line up, and they give me a little opening like this. I looked at those folks, and I said, you know, I didn't aim it over here. I'm over here because don't hit it where I'm looking. Well, by the fourth hole, they all stood behind me. But I'll tell you what, on the 10th hole, 417-yard par 4, dog leg to the right, I hit 2 lucky shots, and I am looking at an 8-foot putt for bird. And after I stroked the 8-foot putt for bird, I was then faced with a 12-foot putt for par. And the people were snickering and laughing. I looked over at Lee Trevino and I said, Lee, how should I play this putt? He said, try to keep it low. But I'm not a great golfer, but I do believe that if you have goals, you have dreams, you have hopes. It was mentioned I was 51 years of age, and I was talking to Mr. Bryan a little bit earlier, and, you know, 51 seemed old, and yet at the same time, I don't think you're ever old as long as you have dreams, as long as you have hopes, as long as you have ambitions. Our football team did not win the national championship this year, but we did set certain goals. We wanted to have a winning season. We wanted to play in a bowl game. We wanted to play on January 1. And we looked on the Heisman Award as a team award for Tim Brown. And we wanted to win the national championship, and we didn't. That was our goal, ladies and gentlemen. And 15 years from now, our athletes will come back and tell a lot of crazy, insane stories about Lou Holtz. The one thing I never want an athlete to ever say is, boy, I wish Coach Holtz believed in us. Or if he only knew how good we wanted to be or what price we're willing to pay, we could have been great. I think the best thing we can do is have high expectations for people. I think that's absolutely essential. I think self-image is absolutely critical in handling people. And if I was to say to you, I want to give you one important thought or my philosophy of life, I'd say it's a belief in yourself. It's amazing how many people don't believe in themselves. If you show me somebody that's petty, somebody that's jealous, somebody that's always complaining and bitching about other people, I'll show you somebody that doesn't like himself. For example, I used to be insanely jealous of my wife. And never once has my wife given me reason to be jealous of her. The problem wasn't with my wife, the problem was with me. I don't like the way I look, most folks don't. Guy introduced me one time, said the best thing I can say about Lou Holtz is he isn't two-faced. Because if he was, that sucker wouldn't be wearing the face he is today, so. And I know I'm funny looking, I understand that, but that used to bother me, because I thought looks was what was important. And every time I looked at somebody, they seemed to be better looking. They seemed to be more intelligent. And I'd always think, why wouldn't my wife rather be with them than with me? Now, one time I was on the Tonight Show with a young lady by the name of Ann Margaret. And I complimented her on her appearance. She said, I don't like the way I look. And I said, pardon me. And she explained she fell off a riser off a stage and had to have plastic surgery. She doesn't like the way she looks. And I came to this conclusion that most folks don't like the way they look. And that doesn't have a thing to do with whether you believe in yourself. But if you get a football player that's negative all the time, it's just the fact that he doesn't like himself, doesn't have enough confidence in himself. So rather than lift other people up, he's always going to try to pull other people down. And nobody's going to make me feel inferior again about my looks. I was at the beach and had on a bathing suit. My wife looked at me and she said, boy, you are skinny, aren't you? I said, honey, I'd like to remind you it was minor defects like that that kept me from getting a better wife. You know, if I was bigger or stronger, well, I don't think I'd make that mistake again, but it didn't look. And I used to think, well, it's intelligence, you know, because I'm not very smart. When I did graduate from high school, I ranked 234 in a class of 278, and that didn't bother me, but it did upset me when the principal said it was a rather stupid class overall. And So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not very intelligent, and I'm certainly not very good looking. But we only have 3 simple little rules that I'll guarantee you have raised the self-image of our athletes. I don't wish to brag, but at the College of William and Mary, and I've never inherited a football team that had a winning season the year before I got there. But at William and Mary, we went to a bowl game, the only one they've been to in 47 years. At NC State, we took a losing program and went to 4 straight bowl games, have the best won-loss record in the history of NC State. At Arkansas, we have the best won-loss record in the history of Arkansas. We turned the Minnesota program around in 18 months, and hopefully we'll win a national championship at Notre Dame, but it's not because of coaching. I believe in 3 simple little rules, and I've had them for my children, I have them for myself, and as long as I abide by 3 simple rules, things function well. They're so simple, but I believe in them. They'll raise the self-image of anybody you're around, whether it be with your children or your employees. And rule number one is the do-right rule. You know the difference between right and wrong. You do what's right, avoid what's wrong, you're going to like yourself. If you have any doubt about the difference between right and wrong, get out the Bible. I personally happen to believe one of the worst things that happens to this society is pornography and a variety of other things where we do things where we know in our hearts not the right and proper thing. And when we do what we know is not right and we get a conscience, and we have a tendency to pick on other people, to demean other people, and try to put other people down rather than dealing with people positively. I have a strong faith in God. I'm not going to make this religious speech. Well, I don't know what the future holds. I do know who holds the future. As long as I do what's right, it seems to fall into place. The second rule we have on our football team is do the best you can. I think the worst thing we can do for employees, the worst thing we can do for our children, is to accept mediocrity if they're capable of doing better. To boost somebody up when they're not doing the best they can, we're doing them a disservice. When you put your head on the pillow late at night, tired, worn out, and exhausted, you like yourself if you've gone the extra mile, if you put forth the extra effort. I coached for a guy by the name of Woody Hayes. Ladies and gentlemen, I loved Woody Hayes. Anybody that ever played or coached for Woody Hayes loved him. Yet people on the outside that only knew Woody Hayes by what the news media said could not understand how could you like Woody Hayes. You loved Woody Hayes because he won't accept less than the best you're capable of doing. I don't condone what he did in the Gator Bowl. And I don't condone a lot of other things he did in coaching. But anybody that ever played or coached for him, he believed in you, ladies and gentlemen. He won't let you be a B student if you're capable of being an A. He won't let you be all-conference if you were capable of being an All-American. And you felt better when you left Woody Hayes because he pushed you to the maximum. See, it takes a great self-image to be a leader, to be a chief executive officer. To be a parent, you've got to have a good self-image. Because if you don't, you're going to want the approval of your children or your players or your employees, and you're going to try to be popular. You want their approval, and that's not the way you lead. That's not the way you get things done. That's not the way you handle adversity. You do it by demanding they do the best they can. I'll never forget we went out to play in the Rose Bowl. For the national championship, they had a backman named O.J. Simpson. The last thing, Coach Hayes and I got in a dissertation about the best way to defend him. I coached the defensive backs for him, and he said, well, I'm going to tell you this, O.J. better not score a touchdown. Perhaps you remember the game, January 1, 1969. In the second quarter, Southern Cal had the ball first down and 10 on their own 20. O.J. Simpson took a handoff, went 80 yards for a touchdown. I was very happy at the time. I was up in the press box. Woody Hayes was on the sideline. But I walked in the locker room at halftime. The first thing that transpired was Woody Hayes, a man I admire, love, and respect, came run up to me, strategically placed his left hand on my jugular vein and squeezed. My eyes got about that big. Now, you have to understand, Coach Hayes, he really meant me no physical harm. He just wanted to be sure he had my undivided attention. And he hollered top of his lungs. He said, why'd O.J. go 80 yards? I said, Coach, that's all he needed. You know, if the ball's on the 10, it got 90, but... And the third thing, and the last rule we have, it's so simple, and that is simply this, that you're going to treat other people as you would like to be treated. It's the golden rule. You want to talk about love? You put love in an organization, and it happens when people treat one another alike. You can only love somebody else when you learn to like yourself, so anytime we go into an organization, we try to raise the self-image, and we do that by doing what's right, doing the best you can, and treating others. Why is that so important? Because it isn't any different in your business, ladies and gentlemen. There are three key questions that everybody asks of one another. Every spouse asks it. Every player asks it of me. I ask it of every player. Every customer asks it of your product. You ask it of every customer. Three questions everybody asks is, can I trust you? The only way you can generate trust is to do what's right. The players have to trust me explicitly. I must be able to trust them for us to have a chance. If I have a player or a spouse that I can't trust, the marriage doesn't have a chance. The team doesn't have a chance. The business doesn't have a chance. And you aren't going to trust people who don't do what's right. It's right to be honest. It's right to be on time. Second question everybody asks, are you committed to excellence? Do you really want to be the best you can? Players want to know, are we really committed to being great at Notre Dame? But we also told our players we wanted a commitment from them, but we would give them one as well. You can't ask your employees to be committed to greatness unless you set the precedent. But to do the best you can at all times answers a question. Are you committed to greatness? And the third question everybody asks is, do you care about me? Do you care about me as a person? When I went to Notre Dame, we took the names off the jerseys. I want to tell you, I've gotten so many letters from people saying, why don't we have names on the jerseys? I said, you're lucky I left the letters or the numbers on. We have ND on the jersey, and I think that's what's really important. But I told the football players this when we went to a bowl game. And only in a bowl game would we put their names on the back of their jerseys. See, I think you've got to have a lot of pride in what you do. I've had to talk to different athletes, and boy, I want to tell you, I like to think I could reach most people. I like to think I could reach most people because I try to be honest and I do care about them. But I'll tell you right now, sometimes if I can't reach an individual, I know I can get him with his name. I don't remember who wrote it, but a poem that said, you got it from your father, was all he had to give. It's yours to use and cherish for as long as you may live. You may lose what you gave you, can always be replaced. But a black mark on your name, son, can never be erased. So guard it very wisely, because after all is said and done, you'll be glad the name is spotless when you give it to your son. I think our name is important. I think we ought to take great pride in it. But I think sometimes you've got to subjugate your own welfare for the welfare of the team, for the welfare of the university, the commitment to excellence in everything we do. The commitment to excellence, not to be great because the band's playing, the crowd's cheering, and the TV lights are on. The commitment to greatness when you're tired and you're worn out and they ask you to lift that extra weight. Or when we're out there practicing late and you're tired and you're worn out and you're exhausted. That's when you determine whether you're going to reach greatness. That determines whether you're really committed to really and truly being outstanding. I wish I could tell you I know something about business, but I don't know an awful lot. But I do know this: in order to sell anything, and we can sell Notre Dame, you got to believe in it. You're probably sitting there saying, what do you know about sales, Lou Holtz? I'd tell you a true story. 1963, I was assistant football coach at the College of William and Mary. 9-month-a-year job, which meant 3 months out of the year I had to get a job in order to support my family. The job I got in 1963 was selling cemetery plots. Now, I don't know how tough your job is, but I want to tell you something. Man, like going on 11. I worked for a guy by the name of Gene Sears. I came home and said to my wife, I said, honey, I got a job. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I am going to sell cemetery plots. Well, she became very negative. She said, you won't sell anything. That summer, I want you to know, I sold our car, our stereo, our TV, our radio. Complete failure as a salesman, but they did send me to a 2-day seminar in Richmond, Virginia. First day I learned very little. The second day guy got up and said, I have a simple philosophy of life. He said, you don't sell anything in this world. He said, you find a need and you fill it. You find a problem, you solve it. He said, every successful business is successful because they help people get what they want. He said, you look at the top businesses in the country today and you look at them 25 years from now, you'll see there's a change because people's needs change. And business must change to meet the needs of the people. College football's changed tremendously. 25 scholarship limit now, whereas before there were none, where you could bring in 60 athletes. Schedules change, people change, business change, life changes. But I'll guarantee you one thing that won't change is trust, commitment, and love will bring any organization to the top. And I didn't come here to preach to you, lecture to you. I came here to convince myself once again as we evaluate our football season, as we look forward to the future. To recapitulate, what I try to say is attitude is all important. Whether I was with the Jets or Minnesota, it wasn't where you are, it's the attitude you have. And the attitude we have is a decision we make. Wherever we are today, good or bad, we're there because we made that decision. Nobody else. And wherever we go in the future will be a decision we make as well. It's a simple plan. You work hard, it builds confidence. Confidence allows you to overcome adversity. You have goals, you have dreams, you have hopes. That's what gives you motivation. All we did to Timmy Brown was try to tell him we believed in him, and any goal he wanted to have, he could realize because he was a talented individual. And self-image is where it all starts. You cannot be a leader, you cannot be anything without a good self-image, except a detractor. Self-image isn't looks, isn't intelligence, isn't success. Self-image is doing what's right, doing the best you can, treating others you like to be treated. Because when everybody asks the three subconscious questions, can I trust you? Are you committed? Do you care about me? The answer will be emphatically yes. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been most kind and most polite to sit here for approximately the last 35 to 37 minutes. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I believe we have a question and answer period now. Thank you for your kind attention. Now we're going to have a question and answer period. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
When are you going to do your newspaper? When are you going to do your newspaper?
I'll do it in a minute. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, but want to get you out by 9:10, promise that.
Lou, Notre Dame has a great record of graduating student athletes and avoiding recruiting scandals. What's the reason for this? To what do you attribute all this success?
It's like somebody said to me, he said, boy, Tim Brown is so meticulous on TV and so are most of your athletes. How do you achieve that? I said, we bring people there that have that. Notre Dame does a beautiful job because they care about their students. And you know what was amazing was we had 1,804 freshmen enter the University of Notre Dame 3 years ago. 1,798 came back as sophomores. We're the only school in America to lose more football games than we lost students. I think that Notre Dame is a special, special place. The reason we graduate is because they aren't going to cut any slack. We don't have any crib courses. And the person that comes to Notre Dame comes there because they want to achieve. I say this in recruiting. You don't come to Notre Dame to learn to do something, as Father Birchall said. You come to Notre Dame to learn to be somebody. We're not there to educate the masses. We're there to educate the individual that wants to aspire to be the very best in his profession, either on the football field or elsewhere. He asked me the question, when was I going to do the newspaper trick? I wasn't going to do it, but somebody always asked. It's like any other newspaper. You have front page for people who want to read the news. You have the comics for people who can't read. You have the editorial page for people who can't think. But like everything else, if you have a faith and you have a belief, people are going to say, you know, I actually thought I saw him tearing that newspaper up. Well, really and truly, there isn't any such thing as magic in anything in this world you do. I like to fool around with magic a little bit. I try to do this with a phone book, but obviously I'm not very strong. Fortunately, if you just have a faith, you have a belief, good things will happen to you as you go along. Now, well, people, I know somebody said, how did he do that? Perfectly, I thought, but in any event, it's not really important.
Lou, we want to know about the drug problem in college football today. How pervasive is it? What causes it? What should we do about it?
Well, the NCAA tests every football team is going to play on January 1, and they came in and tested our athletes just a couple days ago. When we were at the University of Arkansas way back in 1981, I think we were the first school to ever test for drugs. When I went to the University of Minnesota, I made that as a preliminary part of the contract that we had to be able to test for drugs. I had a football team one time go down the tube because of drugs. I don't care about the football team, but I made a vow never again would I ever watch an athlete's life deteriorate because of drugs. People resort to drugs for a variety of reasons. Many times it's because of lack of self-image or lack of self-confidence, whatever the case may be. But I personally believe in the field of athletics, in the field of life, we have a responsibility to do everything we can to set the people in the right direction. We do not test for drugs in order to catch you. What we want to do is we want to do everything we can to prohibit the use of drugs, and in the event there is abuse, to do everything we can to correct it. But I tell the athletes this, peer pressure is what bothers me the most. And when they get there and say, hey man, how about doing this, doing that, you can say to them, man, I'd like to, but I know I'd get caught and I can't afford to do it. Whatever the reason is, I think that drugs is one of the biggest problems we have in this society today, and it's nothing more than an escape. And we have an obligation to do everything we can to get it corrected.
Do you support the idea of a national championship tournament for college football similar to one in basketball? If so, how would you organize it?
I feel we ought to have a playoff system in the year 1977. We beat Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. Our record was as good as anybody in the country. but the University of Notre Dame won the national championship. I felt that we should have, but at that time I felt we ought to have a playoff, and I still think we ought to have a playoff system of either 2 or 4 teams. I don't think you ought to vote the teams, and I think we ought to have a computerized scale. You get so many points for every game you win, so many points for every game your opponent wins, so many points for every game your opponent wins. So that if you play a very demanding and difficult schedule, you will be rewarded. Maybe you only win 8 or 9 football games, but you would have far more points than somebody that played 6 Division II schools or 7 teams that maybe won 1 or 2 games. I think we need to find a way far more equitable than we have now, where we vote strictly according to the one-loss record. I believe the championship ought to be determined on the field, take the top 2, and then play it on January the 7th. Now, everybody's going to say, well, it hurt the bowls. No, that's not true. Today, most bowl games are a lot of fun and they're important. But the national championship's usually determined in one bowl, where if you had a playoff system, every bowl becomes equally important. I think you'd have an awful lot more interest, and I personally believe that it should be determined on the field. I've had students say, well, we'd miss class. You don't miss class during the early part of January, and if you did, you'd only miss it a couple of days. I think it would be great for intercollegiate athletics. I think we ought to take all the money that could be raised through TV, and which I think would be in excess of $10 million, and I think we ought to use it for a worthwhile cause, whether it be scholarships for minority or something. But I think there's a lot of money that could be put to good use. I think it would generate an awful lot of interest. People are going to say you're overemphasized. I want to say this, ladies and gentlemen, they ought to do it the Notre Dame way. And I'm not going to stand up here and brag, because I'm just a part of it. I inherited what Notre Dame has. But our athletes go to class, they take the proper classes, they put their priorities in the proper perspective. Our priorities at Notre Dame are, number 1, your faith, number 2, your family, number 3, your education, number 4, football, and number 5, social. But if we are going to do something, we ought to try to be the best we can. Whether we are or not, that remains to be seen, but that's just my feeling. I think we ought to have a playoff.
Thank you. Lou, have you ever thought about running for political office?
Oh, boy, every day when I'm at Notre Dame is like running for political office. No, I'll never forget, I introduced Governor Clinton down at, I think it was Arkansas, and I get up and I said, Governor Clinton, one thing you don't have to worry about me ever running for political office, because I'd hate to get up one morning and say, hey, they elected me governor and there are 2 million people who didn't want me. Or to wake up saying, I'm President of the United States and there are 29 million people who voted against you. I think that's a little bit strong for me. But one thing I learned in my life is politics and coaching do not mix. I learned that the difficult way, and I do follow politics. I'm deeply intrigued by it. But all I want to do is be the best father, the best husband, and the best coach I can be.